Welcome. We're back with homeschool mom and political expert Alison Slatter to discuss the recent article entitled The Risks of Homeschooling, written by Harvard professor Elizabeth Bartholet, published in Harvard Magazine. Over the past 2 days, we have addressed what is behind the article and how those outside the homeschool community have viewed it. If you missed those, go back and listen in. Today, we want to ask the question: is this article an attack on homeschooling about more than just homeschooling? Alison, can you tackle this one for us?
I sure can, and it most definitely is an attack on
I
far
agree.
more than just homeschooling. This is
Agreed.
a straight up attack on parents. If you have kids and if they are under the age of minority, it's about you.
Awesome.
So everything really boils down to this very one basic question I ask everyone. Whenever they want to argue with me, I always go back to, okay, so to whom were children given? I don't mean
Mhm.
as in property, but I mean who has the final authority? Who's the one that's responsible for nurturing and educating and loving them? Who
Mhm.
has that responsibility? Is that the state or is it parents? To whom were children given? And as soon as you answer that one question, either or, because it's not a both and,
No,
either or, that necessarily dictates many answers on down the
absolutely.
track. And the reality is, Professor Bartolet and her friends have all chosen the state. They've all said
Correct.
the state is the one that ultimately nurtures and cares for and provides for children.
Right.
And so long as we as parents, we become more like caretakers as opposed to parents. So long as we do a reasonable job of raising, citizens, then the government can approve of the job that we're going to do.
Right.
So long as we can prove worthy, the government will allow us permission to have our children.
Right.
And that's really what it boils down to. And that's what her theory is essentially saying.
Mhm.
So if you disagree with the medical professionals on their treatment, well, really, if the government sides with the medical professionals, there goes
Right.
your parental rights.
So
They don't matter.
ultimately, if you believe that your children belong to you, and where do we get that? I mean, the reality is that that didn't just come up between you and I. This is
No.
this is beginning a time we go to God's word and we know that our children are given to us. So if that
Right.
is fundamentally what you believe, which is true, if you don't believe that, let's talk later. But if you believe that, then everything is based upon that. That means your children's medical choices, your children's education. So this is not about education. This is really ultimately not about homeschool versus government school
No.
versus private school. This is about parental rights. And ultimately, I would take
Absolutely.
it honestly, Allison, to the next level to say whether you have kids or not, if you believe in freedom and truth,
Yeah.
then this is for you too. Then this
Right.
applies to you too. She is attacking your God-given freedoms and rights.
Right. Well, and what she's doing, and actually she even states it in the article that she thinks the Constitution is antiquated and
Correct.
is no longer in keeping with. I mean, my goodness, she highlights Germany as her ideal of outlawing homeschooling. Where, oh my goodness, that is not an example I would be using
Right.
because I don't know if you know the history of the German
Let's go
outlawing
back
of.
to World War II, right? Let's
Yeah,
just go back to
it's
their
World War
education
II.
system.
Yes. So um, everyone had to go to state school, but there were some exceptions, and one of them was for homeschooling for certain purposes and reasons.
Mhm.
Hitler came in, just said there's going to be
Right.
no exceptions whatsoever.
Right.
So because he wanted control of all the children's minds in the
Right.
schools, so he outlawed homeschooling because he wanted all the kids.
Absolutely.
But yet she's
She is using
basing
that as her model of an ideal education system. I'm going to repeat that.
yes,
She is using the German education system. And if you do not know about that, go back and learn about World War I, Hitler's youth, the whole bit.
yeah.
She is using that as her model as to what the American education system should look like. If that does not make you want to run, if that does not make you want to stand and defend, I don't know what will. This is about far more than our educational
Well,
choices.
and I don't even really want to talk about Germany. I just my only
Yeah,
point was that it's she's even going so far as to look at international law and saying
correct.
that our constitution as such is antiquated and dated.
Right.
So, okay, so where do we all know we have parental rights. We all
Mhm.
know that we have a right to homeschool in the United
Mhm.
States, but very few of us know where those rights came from or how we
Right.
got them. technically you got to go all the way back to the Magna Carta, but I'm not going to go that far. But there was a gentleman by the name of William Blackstone who was a famous professor of law in England, and he did a great series of books called commentaries, and they're like 4 volumes of this thick. I'm not reading all of them, but anyway, but I've read parts, and essentially what he's saying is that we are given in natural law or God's law certain rights. That's where we get in our inalienable rights part of our preamble and our Declaration of Independence is from William Blackstone. I mean, it is almost word for word. If you put our founding documents next to William Blackstone, there's echoes, believe me, very close echoes between the two.
Wow.
So I know for a fact that our founders, if they studied any kind of law, any kind of governing, they studied Blackstone. So here's the thing. Blackstone had a theory on parents. And one of his things is that parents have 3 responsibilities towards their children. One was maintenance, food, shelter, that sort of thing, clothing, that
Okay.
sort of thing. Protection, i.e. making sure they don't get themselves hurt, that someone doesn't hurt them, that they don't, etc.
Gotcha.
And the third thing, actually, he felt was the most important was education.
Hmm.
I'll get into that. But he also felt that the parent-child bond was the most natural and fundamental bond on the face of the earth.
I
That there
like
was
this guy.
nothing. Oh yeah, no, he was great. He has some other, but he's great, particularly in this area. And almost all of our founders, our entire governing system is based on natural law and
Mhm.
God's law, and that's where Bartlett is saying, I don't agree with any of that.
Right, right.
So that's what's really going on here.
Yeah, she is saying that parents need to do the protection thing, right? This is what I don't understand
Well, no,
is
no, it's not really, because really it goes back
it's the
into
government, sorry, it's the government's job to protect the children as well against
Mhm,
or from the parents.
mhm,
You're right. So she's
right,
gone backwards on all of these things.
right. So she's basically going completely away from where our founders went as far as how parents were viewed, and going towards the idea that the state does everything. We would call that status. So the statist approach. But interestingly enough, Blackstone considered it pretty awful that some countries didn't require parents to educate their children. He actually even stated the last duty of parents to their children is that of giving them an education suitable to their station in life, a
Hmm.
duty pointed out by reason and of far greatest importance of any.
Wow.
That beat out food, that beat out clothing, that beat out shelter.
Directed right towards the parents. Wow.
And he's saying the parent needs to make sure that their child is prepared.
Hmm.
And let's be honest, I really don't want my children living with me the rest of my life. I love them, but I want to be an empty nester at some
Right.
point.
So we have a motive to educate them well, right? We have
Absolutely. Absolutely. God bless it. Um, but also, we can also look at education in another similar vein of another government service that's provided to us, because really public schools are really government schools. It's a government service that's provided to us that we can choose to use if we want to, right?
okay, right.
Right. Now, some parents are forced into it because they perceive that they can't homeschool or they can't afford any other
Which is
options.
still ultimately a choice that they have been I mean, they could go either way.
I don't want to go because we don't know everyone's
Right.
situation, and I'm not about
But
to
it's not a government mandated thing. It's something that they would
Well, they
have
do have to
to
educate.
right,
That is the fact that the children have to be educated is mandated. You do have to do
right.
that. But how that goes about is really up to the parent and what they want to do or how they set that up. So let's look at the trash removal idea. We
Okay.
know removing trash from our homes is an inherent good
Right,
for a lot of reasons.
right.
You don't get sick, you avoid injury, you have nice, clean neighborhoods that don't smell foul.
Okay.
These are all reasons to have good trash removal within our communities.
Right.
And the government recognizes that as an inherent good as well. So much so that they're willing to put taxpayer resources to send a service around to all of our houses to pick it up for us and then take it somewhere.
Okay.
They recognize that as an inherent good too, and they want to help us with that inherent good. Great. But you don't have to use the city service. That's not a requirement.
Right.
You can stick it in your car and take it to the dump if you want, or your buddy's truck. It doesn't, you can do that if you choose to. You can do it yourself. Or you can also choose to hire a private service. We have a couple of private services in the area, and you can just hire one of those instead. There's multiple ways of getting rid of your refuse. But if you choose to use the government service, You are responsible for getting the trash out of your garbage can, tied up into bags, into some sort of receptacle that can then be taken out to the curb for them to pick up and to service your home,
So if you
right?
want to use their service, then you need to do it their way. Is that what you're saying?
Right, absolutely.
Okay,
Well, that's one. Yeah, yeah, you
gotcha.
do it their way, but
Okay,
also it's there, it's available,
right,
but nobody's
gotcha.
coming into your home, knocking on your door and saying, "Can I check your trash cans?"
Right, make sure you did. Make sure you took it out on time and
Right,
used our service. Correct.
right. Nobody's doing that.
Okay,
Everyone's assuming that you are doing what you need to do to keep your
right.
home looking nice and safe and clean and all of those things.
Okay,
That's what's happening. And I think most people would agree. But here's the thing: if what if you don't do that? I mean, most of us have all at least seen clips of hoarders, right? What if
right.
you're not doing that?
Okay,
Well, at that point, the government does have a law that says if you have not kept it and it's no longer habitable for humans,
right.
they'll declare it. They'll declare it as uninhabitable. And at that point, the government will come in and deal with it. But so long as you're doing a basic general job of it, they'll leave you to it. Well, it's the same thing with education, really. So long as you're doing a good job, and
Mhm.
Yoder versus Wisconsin actually gave us a definition of what education should look like for kids, and that definition is they need to be literate and they need to be self-sufficient.
Okay.
Literate, self-sufficient. That is the requirement of education. So,
In the state of
so
Indiana, that's written into
oh
your
no, that is in the United States.
that is then okay, okay,
United States. I mean,
okay,
we have
and then
other laws in Indiana.
each state has
Yeah,
their
they have
own
their
okay,
own, yeah.
gotcha, gotcha.
But I'm not even talking about my own personal state. I mean,
Right,
I've got other things that, for
right,
us that I can talk to, but no, this is throughout the entire country. The entire country, the status of an education is the children must be literate and they must be
okay,
self-sufficient,
okay,
meaning they're not gonna need to go on welfare and some other,
right,
oops, excuse me, other types of things to be able to, support themselves. That's
gotcha,
really what this is all about. And so the government says is, look, so long as your kids come out and they become good, productive citizens, you can use our service or no, not use our service. It's really up to you, but make sure the kids are good.
right,
Yeah.
gotcha,
That's really what's happening. And, it's easier to look at it in that kind of a light as opposed to our children, because our children and our public schools and our community, that's all really woven into. And a lot of people have very high and strong feelings on all of those things. So that's why I like to take it off into like something like an analogy where we can strip away those feelings. We all know
right,
garbage is a good thing to get rid of. And
right,
let's look at it in that term and try to see what is this really about. So
right,
what's really about is whether or not the government should be coming into your house and emptying your garbage cans for you.
right,
I think we
and
would
I
all say that's
think
intrusive.
when they come into your house and empty your garbage cans for you, they might notice the sink full of dishes and then they might notice this. And pretty soon, which is why we're saying this is about more than just homeschooling. This is
Right.
about more than just education. Because if they believe that the state owns your children or your children are belonging to the state, then it doesn't stop with the garbage. It doesn't stop with the education. It
No.
then moves into, I mean, honestly, it could not end. There would be no end to it if truly the idea of our children do not belong to us gets woven in, we just opened a can of worms, we could say. So
Right.
that's a great analogy. That's an incredible analogy. The public school is a service that is offered,
Yes.
and
And you
that's
can
where it
choose to
leaves.
choose to take advantage of it. Now, there's a
Yep.
really interesting case that's coming out of Michigan as to whether or not, um, and this is a schooling thing, but I try to keep track of some of this stuff. And with my kids being dyslexic, there's some of the special needs stuff that I always have to kind of keep my finger on as well. But
Mhm.
it's an interesting case of whether or not children have a right to an education.
Mm.
And that is, okay, so these kids are compelled to be in these buildings for X number of hours per, 5 days a week. When they get out of it, do they have the right to have access to that education? Their parents are complying with the law, and the school is telling them that they're going to be educating their child to a certain standard. Yet when they come out, they aren't.
Hmm. Interesting.
And there's a lot of parental rights things that are interesting there. But I actually, a personal opinion on that is I really think what they're doing is trying to hold the schools to the same level that they hold us through Yoder versus Wisconsin. So it's, are they literate and are they self-sufficient? Well, I think in some of those schools, particularly in the area that they're talking about, probably aren't. And
They
if
aren't.
that's the case, that's a real issue because we all have to follow that. And as homeschoolers, we all say that's a bare minimum. They need to be literate and they need to be self-sufficient, at
Right.
least.
Right.
For me in my house, if all I can say is they're literate and self-sufficient, I need to take myself out to the woodshed. But
Right, right. Well, and you
I
know what?
expect far
This is
more.
a topic for another day, but honestly,
Right.
I would say most homeschoolers, when we look at testing, when we look at, just overarching how homeschoolers stack up against public school, I will just guarantee right here and say it on record, we're doing a lot more than having literate and self-sufficient children. And all
Most
you have to
are,
do is look
yes.
around
The
and look
vast
at
majority are,
right,
absolutely, and I'm dedicated to that kind of, academic excellence as well, and I don't honestly, I don't know too terribly many where that's not the case, but
right,
nevertheless, I mean, even still, I mean, the kids that, maybe I might question a little bit, even the kids are happy.
right,
They're
right,
they're they're well nurtured, they're loved,
right.
um, and psychologically, they're in good shape. They don't have the panic
Absolutely.
attacks, they don't have the depression and
Absolutely.
anxiety and the things that I'm seeing that are going through our traditional educational system, our government educational system today, particularly as a dyslexia tutor. I mean, I've seen a lot of kids come through that have a lot of trauma because they haven't been able to do what the schools are asking of them. I
Right.
mean, they're fish trying to climb a tree.
Right.
You're not
Absolutely.
gonna do well.
No. And I was a public school teacher, and I can say there were many children who were literate and could potentially be self sufficient, but they were not healthy children. They were not well, and they were not looked at as a whole child. So
Right,
coming from the public school system, also I can attest to that as
right.
well.
And let's
Um,
go back to our analogy of the trash service. Just because the government offers a service to remove our trash does not mean that they now have the responsibility for our trash removal.
right.
Responsibility is still on us. Same
Correct.
with the schools. The responsibility to educate our children is still on us. It is not the public schools' responsibility to educate the children. It's ours. Now, we can hire the public schools to
Mhm.
educate our children, and if they tell us they'll educate our kids and they don't, that's an entirely different scenario. And that's essentially what that
Right.
Michigan court case is about.
That's
But
about
that's not what we're talking about here.
right.
So what we are talking about is state control. And
Yes.
statists, they want the state to control the education of children, of all children, not just a few, but everyone's children. And so if the state must approve of the education of a child, then it's no longer up to us parents. It's no longer our responsibility. It's now the state's. And
Right.
that brings us to things like vouchers and ESAs. If we're getting the money from the government, isn't that grounds for them telling us that really we're government
Absolutely.
employees?
I would say he who pays the piper picks the song, right?
So I'm just saying, I mean, there's a lot of views on that. I personally, I see a lot of danger in having
Mhm.
things like ESAs and vouchers coming into the homeschool world,
Mhm.
because what I ultimately see it doing is putting us back under the kind of restrictions that the public schools that have not worked for our kids. And the whole reason that we're looking at homeschooling to begin with is because the system and the methodologies and the programs that they're using haven't worked with our kids.
Mhm.
If now we have the government coming in and they are going to insist on being able to ensure that their money is being used right, because I'm sorry, I expect my legislature to know where my money's going if I'm paying them.
Absolutely.
They have every right to know. And the
Absolutely.
reality is that means now they're going to care about how you homeschool your kid and they're going to
Mhm.
have ideas about how that ought to be done.
Absolutely. I preach it. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And like I said, I would like to have you back on and discuss just that. Just discuss the vouchers, the taking government money for what we do. That needs to be discussed, and I'd like to do a whole session on that with
Yeah, I
you.
mean, and it's not about, again, I go back to, I keep wanting to say, I'm not fear mongering. I mean, I recognize that there's families that this would really, really help, but you have to understand what you're giving up in the process. And I find too many people, particularly new homeschoolers, don't understand. They haven't been able to enjoy the liberty and the freedom of doing precisely what their children need, exactly when they need it, that they don't understand that the minute you take that money is exactly what you're doing. You're
Right.
giving up that flexibility. You're giving up the ability for your child to do exactly what he needs. And
Absolutely.
that's where I'm going. guys, let's have a full-throated discussion on this, because
Right.
this is not about it. And not only that, it feeds right into the hands of these people who say that education is the responsibility of the state, not the parent.
Right.
Once again, that is ceding our
Right.
rights to this to the government. We're
Which brings
saying,
us back to the question that we're addressing is
yes,
this about more than just homeschool? And I think we have
absolutely.
very much answered that this is about far more than homeschooling. All parents need to pay attention, because all parents' freedoms are under attack when we have articles like this come out and we have people that are listening to them.
Yep.
So we're going to wrap up this session.
Yep.
Thank you again, Allison.
My pleasure.
Parents, we need you to be aware that this is about more than homeschooling. Your parental freedoms are under attack. So we're going to come back tomorrow. And I know many of you asked, is there data? I mean, you read this article and you think, I haven't seen any of this. Is this really actually happening? So we're going to look at, is there actual data behind what's being said? And then again, Friday, come back and we're going to say, what can you do about it? You know what this is about. You know who is behind it. You know it's attacking your parental rights. So what now? And we are going to share with you what now. So we will see you
Absolutely.
back here tomorrow and answer the next question. Thanks
Great.
again.
Thanks. Bye.